Aloha, and welcome to another episode of Hangin at the Reef, a podcast where we deep dive into an ocean of knowledge and explore the vibrant world around us with experts that are making waves. I'm your host, Jeffrey Rich, and today we have a very special guest who has dedicated his life to the advancement of marine research and aquaculture. Joining us today is Dr. Shaun Moss, an accomplished marine scientist with over 3 decades of experience in the field. Dr. Moss received his doctoral degree in zoology from the University of Hawaii in 1993 and went on to work in eastern Indonesia as a Fulbright scholar. Upon returning to Hawaii, he became an associate professor in the Marine Sciences Department at Hawaii Pacific University. From 1997 to 2009, Dr. Moss made significant strides as the director of the shrimp department at the Oceanic Institute, conducting groundbreaking research on shrimp aquaculture, including selective breeding and sustainable technologies. His journey continued as Vice President of Research and Development at the Oceanic Institute and Director of the USDA-funded U.S. Marine Shrimp Farming Program. In 2012, Dr. Moss stepped up as Acting President and Chief Executive Officer for Scientific Programs at the Oceanic Institute, and today serves as Executive Director of the Oceanic Institute at Hawaii Pacific University. With more than 60 peer-reviewed publications and vast international experience across Asia, Dr. Moss is a pioneer in his field. We are thrilled to have him with us today to talk about his incredible journey, the future of aquaculture, and how his work is contributing to more sustainable oceans. Please welcome Dr. Shaun Moss. Welcome to Hangin at the Reef, Shaun. We're excited to have you on today. So you serve as the Executive Director of the Oceanic Institute at Hawaii Pacific University, and you've worked in and around aquaculture all over the world. Can we start by maybe talking a little bit about your professional journey and the history of the Oceanic Institute?
Sure. And thank you for having me. This is an absolute joy. I came to Hawaii in 1986 as a graduate student at the University of Hawaii, getting my doctoral degree. And I was fortunate to have the opportunity to come and do my aquaculture research for my degree here at Oceanic Institute through a connection I had prior at the University of Delaware, where I received my master's degree. And I basically have been working at OI on and off since 1986. So I've been here a long time. I started at the bottom as a research technician scrubbing tanks and worked my way up the org chart and was fortunate to get funding and to stay here professionally since really 1986. I did teach at Hawaii Pacific University in the Marine Science Department in 1995 and 1996, and then was recruited by OI to come back and run their shrimp program for many years. And in 2012, roughly, I got demoted up the org chart and became CEO and executive director and wore multiple hats.
That's quite a promotion quickly, going from starting getting your feet wet, so to speak, to running the show, huh?
Yeah, it seemed like an eternity, but no, it was I'll get to this later, but the people, the place, and the mission here are so unique and so incredible that it was an easy decision for me to stay as long as the organization would have me. So it's been an absolute dream job for decades, and I hope to serve in this capacity for a while longer. It's been quite a journey. The origins of Oceanic Institute is a very storied history. OI began roughly in the early 1960s. A gentleman named Tap Pryor had a vision for a marine entertainment park combined with a marine research center. And those were the beginnings of what are now Sea Life Park and Oceanic Institute. So we were tied at the hip with Sea Life Park for many years. We still interact with them. We still have collaboration with them. But Tap Pryor's vision was quite remarkable at the time, and his legacy persists today. Mr. Pryor was quite a unique gentleman. He was a marine biologist. He was a businessman. He was a state senator here in Hawaii. So he was a Renaissance individual. He's in his early 90s and he's still active today in aquaculture in Maine. So he was the visionary that viewed Makapu'u Point, with now Sea Life Park, HPU, and Mackay Pier, all as this epicenter for marine science, exploration, research, and public awareness. His wife was an interesting character too. Karen Pryor was a mammal behaviorist, and she was involved in the early cetacean behavior studies and helped develop the clicker technique to train dolphins and
Dolphins,
porpoises
yeah.
and even dogs. So, and she married one of the Lindbergh sons, Charles Lindbergh's son. So it's this incredibly storied history that we're part of. We're part of this ongoing legacy about Makapu'u Point and this place and this intersection of marine sciences. So it's a legacy that I hope continues it well into the future.
Well, I know there's a number of really interesting and exciting things in the history and the work that's being done out there, and we'll touch upon those in a moment. But first I wanted to ask. So you used the phrase aquaculture. For our
Yes.
listeners that aren't as familiar with what that means, can you give us a definition and a little background?
Absolutely. Aquaculture very broadly can be defined essentially as farming aquatic organisms as opposed to terrestrial plants, grains, and livestock. So it's the aquatic analog of agriculture. Aquaculture is much more challenging because you're culturing organisms in an aquatic medium, which has a lot of inherent challenges to it, but it makes it an interesting industry to work in. And aquaculture is also different in a lot of ways because it really can operate at this nexus, this intersection of food security and marine conservation. And that's where really Oceanic Institute hangs its hat. We look at sustainable approaches to aquatic food production and using aquaculture as a tool for marine conservation. So it's a timely endeavor. These two areas, food security and marine conservation, are only going to get increasingly more important as we look at a rising global population, approaching 10 billion people on this planet, all of whom need food to eat, global climate change exacerbating environmental problems in our oceans. So aquaculture in the context of this food security, marine conservation nexus is really going to get increasingly more important. And this is where I get really excited about HPU, because we have this asset here and we can train future leaders in this really transdisciplinary discipline to solve complex problems that we're going to be dealing with. So it's an exciting time.
Very much so. And as I was studying the history of the Institute, and I think it was back in 2014 when HPU merged under
Yes.
President Chad Wright. And
Yes.
I guess there were a lot of synergies between the organizations. But tell us a little bit about that history and that vision dating back to the merger of the two organizations.
Yeah. So I'll take a step back further. So from the inception of Oceanic Institute over time, it focused on a variety of different aspects of marine science. In the early days, it was more oceanography, ocean science, development of submersibles, underwater submarines, and less about aquaculture. In the mid 1980s, we had a very powerful and kind senators, the late Senator Dan Inouye, who helped OI secure federal earmarks at the time. These were long-term sustained funding for research here at Oceanic Institute. And that's where we really began to drill down and focus on aquaculture research. And those federal earmarks continued from, say, 1984 to about 2012. And it was during that time period when we had long-term sustained significant funding where we really developed novel technologies that had local, national, and global impacts. Research in general is expensive. To move the needle on technology, you need long-term sustained funding. And through these federal earmarks and the good graces of the late Senator Dan Inouye, OI really put ourselves on the map through the development of these technologies, and we were able to transfer them globally. Unfortunately, in 2012, federal earmarks became taboo, and they were cut rather drastically. And with that, a lot of our funding was cut. So we had to change our business model quite rapidly. And shortly thereafter, it was through this, really Chad Wright serving as a connecting point. He was the president of HPU at that time, and he was also the chairman of the OI board at the time. He saw that there was this potential synergy here. And in 2014, we merged with HPU to become a directed research unit within the university, continuing our mission of what I would describe as applied marine biology. It's aquaculture using the basic sciences of marine biology, chemistry, and physics, and engineering with an applied end. And that, again, is the food security, marine conservation nexus. And so it's been a really interesting ride. So we've been with the part of HPU now since 2014, 10-year anniversary since the merger. And our campus is changing out here. The Makapu'u campus is changing, but we're blessed because OI still retains our core infrastructure, our core capacity, and we've been allowed to continue to pursue our mission of developing aquaculture technologies and transferring them throughout the world to improve aquatic food production.
Wow, very interesting. No one has been alive, in a period of such rapid technological innovation as us currently,
Yeah.
the folks living on the planet today. But when you think back to some of those early days, you talked about technological innovation. What were some of those technologies back then, and how have you seen them evolve over time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the, I think, most important contributions that OI has made to the global aquaculture industry was in the early 1990s in the context of shrimp farming. Shrimp is the #1 seafood consumed in the United States. Per capita consumption of shrimp is about 4 pounds. So for every man, woman, and child in the United States, we eat on average 4 pounds per person per year. That's a lot of shrimp. It's a global industry. It's worth tens of billions of dollars. But in the early 90s, it wasn't a very sophisticated industry globally. And Dr. Gary Pruder, who was my boss and was the one who got me out here to OI, had a vision at the time, along with others, that we could take the tools, the selective breeding tools from the poultry and swine industry, which were pretty well developed in the early 90s, and apply them to shrimp. So in the early 1990s, we were the world's first research organization in the world to try and adopt and adapt these genetic tools that were used for decades and longer, centuries, for the livestock industry, cattle, swine, and chickens, to shrimp. And lo and behold, while we had to modify some of the approaches, they worked in a way that were quite fantastic. And what it told us is that the genetic assumptions underlying selective breeding operate at the cellular level, irrespective of whether the animal has scales or fur or hair or skin. The application of these tools applied to shrimp. And what that did was we started to create a genetically improved shrimp that had global value. It grew faster than wild shrimp. It survived better than wild shrimp. We applied tools to select for resistance to specific viral pathogens. And we not only revolutionized the global shrimp farming industry through the application of genetic tools, we created a multi-million-dollar industry here in Hawaii. And in 2015, the Hawaii shrimp broodstock industry that produced these genetically improved shrimp through selective breeding, they marketed their shrimp to large shrimp hatcheries in Asia, where the broodstock would produce the babies that were stocked in the ponds and then harvested for the meat. It created a $40 million a year industry here in Hawaii in 2015, which then catalyzed a roughly $14 billion per year industry in Asia. So this little research center in Waimanalo, Hawaii, was absolutely instrumental in creating the Hawaii shrimp broodstock industry, which I think even last year generated more than $30 million. And then it catalyzed this massive global shrimp farming industry using these selectively bred disease-free animals. And the industry's never looked back. The global shrimp farming industry now produces far more shrimp than wild-caught shrimp for global consumers everywhere. And in fact, aquaculture in general provides more seafood globally than wild-caught seafood, irrespective of species. So it shows you how a dedicated group of researchers advancing technologies from other sectors and adapting them to the aquatic realm just really created this massive paradigm shift in the global shrimp farming industry. And we were a big part of that, and that's very, very fulfilling. So one of the technologies is the application of genetic tools to create a better widget, if you will, that outperforms any wild stocks. And now with the advent of molecular genetic tools, we can expedite, fast track genetic improvement. And so it's an exciting time. The technology is constantly evolving and maturing and advancing in ways that allow us to produce a better farmed animal. And with that comes a much more sustainable approach to aquatic food production.
Wow, it's interesting. Things certainly change over time. As an aside, I read just the other day somewhere that, roughly 100 years or so ago, shrimp, lobster were basically fed to prisoners and not
That's right.
considered,
Right.
crustaceans for the upper crust like they
Right.
like
Right.
they are now. So times have
My
certainly.
how how our palate has changed, right? I mean, that's right. Lobsters were like the cockroaches of the ocean, and they were fed to prisoners in the Northeast, I think up in Boston, in the Boston area. But
Exactly.
yeah,
My, how
yeah,
times have changed.
yes,
For those that aren't as familiar with the Oceanic Institute or Hawaii Pacific University, you're on a beautiful spread of land, really a
Mm,
one of a kind place
yes,
in the world, really. The Makapuku campus,
yes,
which is on the east shore of Oahu
yes,
here, and part of the HPU campus, contains the
yes.
Oceanic Institute and some other facilities. But for our listeners that aren't as familiar, the layout, can you give maybe a bit of an overview of what Makapuku entails in terms of the facilities and all the entities that are located in and
Yeah,
around that area?
sure. No, it's a special place. Makapu'u has a very special place in the Hawaiian culture. From an aquaculture perspective, there's three really invaluable assets that come together that make this place truly remarkable and enables us to do the great things we do. The first is we're right on the ocean, and so we have the ability to take clean seawater 100 yards from our property line or less, bring it to the property, do something with it. And in our case, we do aquaculture with it or marine biology research. And then critically importantly, we have the ability to discharge the water. So we have the ability to access high quality seawater, do aquaculture research with it, and then discharge it. If you were to try and recreate this property with those capacities de novo, it would take tens of millions of dollars or more and a decade of permitting to be able to replicate the capacity and the assets we have here. So I would say first and foremost, what makes this property and HPU and OI almost globally unique is that capacity. And we can bring it up to 2,600 gallons per minute of seawater for our research needs. And then we're permitted through our dispersion wells to get rid of the seawater. That is unprecedented. It really in Hawaii and anywhere with the tropical water we have. So that's a huge asset, number one. Number two is we have inherent biosecurity because of our geographical isolation. Hawaii in general, obviously, we're the most isolated island group in the world, smack in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. That confers a huge biosecurity advantage to us. And it's why the shrimp breeding technology took off here in Hawaii, because we don't have shrimp fisheries nearby. We don't have large shrimp farms here to propagate disease. So our inherent biosecurity is invaluable. The corn seed companies, genetic corn seed companies, came to Hawaii in particular because of the biosecurity. So by being geographically isolated, we have this inherent biosecurity asset that's invaluable. We also have unique infrastructure here. Aquaculture demands very unique infrastructure, hatchery, larval rearing, maturation, grout, all of the processes that are required to do aquaculture research and raise aquatic organisms require unique assets, which we have. We had the world's first shrimp breeding center. As I talked about earlier, that's a very unique asset. Very few places in the world have that capacity. And then finally, the asset is the people asset. It's the human resources. We have content experts here who are world renowned in their field. We have access to really good students, and we can talk about this later, where I think, is the #1 employer of former HPU marine science students, because they come out of that program very well prepared and make excellent research technicians, assistants, and associates. So it's kind of this coming together of these assets and elements: the infrastructure, the place, the ability to pull in the water, the unique infrastructure, the content expertise that we have that makes OI first and foremost unique in the world. And then in addition to OI on this property at the Makapu'u campus, we have the Center for Marine Debris Research, which has an incredible staff and a great partnership with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, folks from the federal government working with them, HPU faculty from the College of Natural and Computational Sciences. They've created this unique kind of center of excellence, really studying marine debris. Microplastics are a problem everywhere with everything. It's amazing. We're finding nano and microplastics in all kinds of human tissue and aquaculture products. It's everywhere. And the folks at the Center for Marine Debris Research here have really powerful analytical equipment to really start to drill down on where the plastics are coming from and what we can do with the plastics, not just micro and macro plastics, but they work with large ghost nets and large floating debris. They're doing incredible research. We have HPU faculty members from the College of Natural and Computational Sciences doing really interesting research in fish energetics and physiology, coral reef research. It's really a hotbed of marine science activity, due in part to that ability to use seawater. So it really creates this unique environment. And then the students now coming here, I mean, they provide cheap labor from my standpoint, but no, they provide a really talented workforce, and we're discovering and providing more and more opportunities to bring students in to participate in our research for that hands-on experiential learning, which is invaluable. And there's a number of mechanisms we can talk about on how OI at least does that. And they work in the Center for Marine Debris Research and other projects as well. But we've benefited tremendously from both undergraduate and graduate student help.
Yeah, and I know the Center for Marine Debris Research is not just about research, but I think they had rolled out a bounty program not too long ago that helps take dilapidated fishing gear out of the waters and helps reduce the amount of contributions to all of those problems with microplastics.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's more than just the hardcore research, but they're really good at that too. I mean, they have an incredibly talented team and very unique analytical tools that really elevate that center to a center of excellence. Yeah.
Yep. And I also heard that the Makapu'u campus is a new home for the turtle rehab facility.
Yes. Recently, they're occupying part of the Waimanalo side of our campus, and HMAR is doing really important work in gathering and rehabilitating the green sea turtles here that can have a number of issues.
You know, and I think for our listeners too, you know, the campus itself might not be so unfamiliar. There's Sea Life Park next door, so those that have visited Oahu may have ventured over there. And then also for those that like entertainment, I guess it's also been the site of a couple of fairly well-known movies and TV series from I think it was TC's helicopter landing pad for the original Magnum series.
Yeah. 51st Dates, people who've seen with Rob Schneider and I forgot who the actress was, but 51st
Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore.
Drew Barrymore, there you go. Yeah,
yes.
they did quite a bit of shooting here. Yeah, periodically we'll get notifications from Sea Life Park asking us to keep the parking lot open because they're going to be doing a shooting. So it's such a scenic, beautiful place. If you've never been to Makapu'u Point, come out here. It's gorgeous. There's a lighthouse trail nearby that has a paved walkway that's just an incredible hike. Sea Life Park is here. OI, unfortunately, we're not open to the public because of biosecurity concerns, but the spot here is fantastic, and it just adds to the joy of working here for sure. The aesthetic beauty, yeah.
It truly is a one-of-a-kind facility. So I know, central to your success has been the development of a number of new commercial partnerships at OI. You mentioned one with Disney Aluana.
Yeah, this is another, let me just take a step back. I've been in the aquaculture research universe for decades, and rarely do people in my position get to be part of, directly or indirectly, part of a technology development that truly moves the needle in an industry. And I was blessed to be at the start of the shrimp breeding work, and I experienced a huge paradigm shift in that multi-billion-dollar-a-year industry from the research we did here at OI. And kind of the second realm of huge advancement is in the realm of marine ornamental fish aquaculture. And so in 2015, Dr. Chad Callan and his team were the first in the world to produce in captivity an iconic reef fish here in Hawaii called the yellow tang. It's a highly prized ornamental fish in the global aquarium trade, which is also a multi-billion-dollar-a-year industry. But prior to Dr. Callan and his team's work, and they're still carrying this forward, all of the yellow tang in the pet shops sold all over the world were wild caught and mostly off the coast of Kona on the Big Island. Wild fish collectors were gathering 300,000 to 400,000 fish per year for the global aquarium trade. And so Chad and his team thought, we really need to provide an alternative product to wild caught yellow tang, because it may not be that beneficial to the reef to go in and collect that many fish and to be on the reef. And so we wanted to be able to, through our technology, develop procedures and protocols for the captive rearing of yellow tang. And in 2015, we were the first in the world to do that. And it was an incredible achievement. And since then, Chad and his team have refined the tools to produce yellow tang in captivity. And we have a commercial partner now who is taking our research surplus fish and providing that alternative in the marine ornamental fish market. So that allowed us to develop core competencies in the aquaculture of marine ornamental reef fish, which are much more challenging in many ways than growing fish for food, like growing mullet and moi and other fish. The techniques are a little different. The larval fish of the reef fish are much more fragile. They require a very special live feed, and I won't get into the details, but it's there's a different approach you do in the aquaculture of food fish versus marine ornamental fish for the aquarium trade. So they developed this core competency in producing yellow tang in captivity. And that spawned a relationship with Aulani Resort at Disney and the Georgia Aquarium, which is a fantastic aquarium on the East Coast. If you ever get a chance to visit the Georgia Aquarium, it's one of the best in the world, I think. So we've developed these partnerships with these large public and private aquaria. At Aulani, they have a large aquarium filled with local coral reef fish for display, where people can look through a viewing window. And it's big enough where people can actually go snorkel. People who stay at the resort can go snorkel in this artificial coral reef habitat. One of the collateral benefits of that, in addition to generating revenue from tourism, is that in the reef, the fish think they're in the wild and they reproduce just like they do on a real coral reef. And so they're producing fertilized eggs. And a few years ago, again, Dr. Callan and his team had a connection with the folks at Aulani and said, can we come in and put egg collectors in your aquarium and bring those fertilized eggs back to OI, where we will raise them and see what's there and see what comes out. And so we now have been doing that for several years with funding from Georgia Aquarium. So every month or so, we'll go out to Aulani Resort on the west side of the island of Oahu, put some egg collectors in their massive aquarium, collect fertilized eggs. We have no idea what species they're coming from. We drive them back to OI, we raise them until they're tiny little juvenile fish, and we've produced in captivity a number of species that have never been produced in captivity before. A lot of them are endemic to Hawaii, found nowhere else in the world. And then we provide some of those to Georgia Aquarium, where their goal is to eventually replace all wild-caught fish with captive reared fish. So we're not taking from the ocean, we're producing in a sustainable way. And that's a very novel relationship we've developed both with Aulani, Maui Ocean Aquarium, Waikiki Aquarium. We put egg collectors in these different sites to collect the eggs. The other big benefit to us, Jeff, is that we aren't burdened with the care and maintenance and cost of the broodstock fish, the mom and pop fish that are producing the fertilized eggs. In an aquaculture context, that can consume a lot of capital resources carrying and maintaining the broodstock. The care and maintenance of the broodstock is done by the public and private aquariums. They're the ones housing the mom and pop fish. All we're doing is collecting the eggs from those systems, bringing them back to OI and raising them in captivity, because that's our unique skill set. We know the Coca-Cola formula to get those fertilized eggs to settle juveniles and then out back to the public aquaria. So it's just this incredible relationship and symbiotic mutual partnership we have with these organizations that allow us to do some of the things we're doing. It's very exciting.
Wow. It must be totally exciting to, to see what species come from the collection.
Yeah.
What's the biggest surprise? I mean, in terms of something that your eyes pop when you saw it. You're like, I didn't think we'd get one of those.
Yeah, there's a whole laundry list of local fishes that we knew the parents were in the big aquarium, but we weren't sure if we had them, and no one has ever documented the larval stages of these things. So raccoon butterfly fish, potter's angels, flame angels, Hawaiian cleaner wrasse. If you're an ichthyologist, pardon the expression, and know these fish, you can picture them in your head, but they're just beautiful local reef fish that any saltwater aquarist would want in their tanks. And they just started popping up in our larval rearing tanks. And I'll tell you, that gets the technical team really excited. I mean, it's, a lot of the work we do in aquaculture is pretty routine and mundane at times, and doing water quality and cleaning tanks and this and that. But when you have a hodgepodge of fertilized eggs and you have no idea what they are, and to raise them and see them fall out as juveniles and identify them, that's a dopamine rush. I mean, that's
better
what
than, I was gonna say, better than Christmas morning to see what you got.
It really is. I mean, that's what drives researchers. It's creating new knowledge. I mean, that's what jazzes up a scientist. When you do something that no one else has done or very few people have done, and you generate new know-how and knowledge, that's the rush. That's what scientists live for. We know we have to go through the routine and the mundane at times, but it's those fleeting moments of, oh my gosh, look what we just did. That's the rush. That's what draws people to do what we do.
Very, very cool. And I can see how, this partnership and this initiative would reduce the strain on coral reefs from, commercial collection of these fish for commercial sale around the world. Did this strategy naturally just reduce the number of folks that are out there collecting these, or was there regulatory or any government intervention to help reduce that as well? Or was it just driven by, the availability of the species through this commercial venture?
Yeah, that's a great question. There was, I think, my timing may be off, may have been pre-COVID, around the time of COVID, the state DLNR, Department of Land and Natural Resources, actually put a moratorium on the collection of wild-caught reef fish for the aquarium trade. An injunction was recently lifted, and that ban may be lifted soon. So there may be a restricted number of licenses to go out to collectors to collect more fish. But as of today, there's no one has a license to go collect wild fish. So virtually all of the yellow tang you see if you go to a pet shop in London, England, or Chicago, or Tampa, Florida, or wherever, and you see a yellow tang in a pet shop for sale, it very likely came from Makapu'u here at OI through our commercial partner. That may change when DLNR administers some new licenses, so that landscape may change. But Jeff, this is an important point. These captive reared fish are, in my opinion, significantly hardier than those collected from the wild, because they've gone through a selection stage in the hatchery. And the fish that we produce in captivity are, I think, much better adapted to life in someone's aquarium in Iowa, for example. Whereas if you go out into the wild and you catch a fish and you try and get it to first the collector to land, then from land to the wholesaler, and then the wholesaler to the retailer, and ultimately to the end user, there's a lot of opportunities for high mortality, simply because the fish aren't accustomed to that kind of lifestyle. So the product, I think, that comes out of aquaculture in the context of marine ornamental fish are much hardier than wild caught. And that's one of the compelling reasons we think ultimately the consumer is going to drive the market, and I think they're going to be more inclined to purchase captive reared than wild caught. In addition to the reasons you stated, it may not be a sustainable fishery. There's a lot of debate about that, and if it's managed well, it might work. But at the end of the day, captive reared fish are going to be more sustainable than wild caught, whether we're eating them for food or whether we're putting them in our aquarium. That's why aquaculture is the fastest growing sector in agriculture, and why aquaculture is growing by leaps and bounds every year, because we are using more and more sustainable technologies, whether again it's for food or for the aquarium trade or what have you. So it's a growing industry, and again an increasingly important industry.
Wow, it just so many benefits from the work that you're doing. One of the things that comes to mind is I'm interested to know more about how the work done there is addressing global climate change. Give us a sense of is there research? Are there programs or applications that are working to understand or combat some of the issues around global warming and global climate change?
Yeah, that's another great question. So aquaculture can play a critically important role there. We've submitted grant proposals to selectively breed, say, shrimp for higher thermal tolerance. It's really going to be a water temperature issue and maybe a water acidification issue. But there's a great template right down the road. The University of Hawaii has the Hawai'i Institute of Marine Biology, where they've been doing some really important work looking at corals and thermal tolerance of corals, and how can we select corals that have this tolerance to thermal stress. Corals, as you may know, when confronted with warmer waters, they expel the algae that lives in their tissue, and it's called a bleaching event. They go from this beautiful color contributed by the algae that live in their tissues to this dull gray white color, because the algae get expelled out of the coral tissue in response to this thermal stress. So the folks at Coconut Island at Hawai'i Institute of Marine Biology have been working for quite a while on identifying strains of corals that do better in the face of thermal stress. We can take that model and adapt it and adopt it to any marine organism, whether it's striped mullet that we stock in the Hawaiian fish ponds or shrimp that we grow in ponds. And I think that could be a very valuable tool to deal with the increasing stress borne out by global climate change and increasing water temperatures. We're also kind of globally experiencing ocean acidification. As we pump CO2 in the air, it becomes dissolved in the salt water, which makes the salt water more acidic, the ocean water more acidic. And it's become such a problem in the Pacific Northwest, where they used to grow, they still do grow a lot of oysters, but the baby oysters there are having a tough time because the ocean conditions are so acidic from this drop in what's called the drop in pH resulting from CO2 being absorbed into the ocean, that the tiny little shells of the baby oysters are literally dissolving and they can't do very well. So it's going to be an increasingly more challenging landscape as the chemistry and the temperature of our oceans change. But I think we have the tools to help combat it. What would help combat it is reducing the amount of CO2 we're putting into the environment. But that's a bigger challenge to face. But
You're facing a lot of challenges.
yeah.
Sure.
No, I think it's certainly an area that is ripe for research. And so I think as we project out, what are the types of proposals we're going to be submitting in the next few years, there'll be a number of them that will try and address how do we combat global climate change through selective breeding. To me, that's a very powerful tool to use to combat global climate change.
You know, you mentioned Coconut Island, and that's up in Kaneohe here on
Yes.
Oahu. And for our listeners that don't know, that was the site of filming Gilligan's Island.
Yes. A lot of references to old movies and TV
Yep.
shows. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, Hawaii is so manifestly beautiful that you can see why it would attract Hollywood types out here for sure. Yeah, that's right. But it's also the site of some incredible marine biology research, as is Makapu'u. The University of Hawaii at Coconut Island deals with more with corals and more with kind of more basic science, maybe. Whereas here we're focused on very applied marine biology. The Center for Marine Debris Research, for example, is very applied in its mission. Oceanic Institute, very applied in our mission. So for the students who are listening, as you think about your love of the ocean and a potential marine biology major, I would encourage you to think about applied marine biology. There's so many challenges we face that we need good, smart, young marine biologists to come and help us in this fight for food security and marine conservation and protection against micro and nanoplastics. So, I mean, there's a lot of really good basic marine biology and other conservation marine biology, but thinking as marine biology as an applied science, I think that's what drove me to aquaculture. I was fascinated with marine biology, but I'm a bit older than probably every listener you're going to have. So Jacques Cousteau was famous when I was young, and I loved watching him on TV. And I knew I wanted to be a marine biologist since I was a little kid, but I didn't know what flavor. I just wanted to be a marine biologist. But as I started to go through the high school and college curricula of biology and started to really focus down, when I became a graduate student and was introduced to aquaculture, I said, aha, there's my interest, because there's a real applied outcome here that can really add value globally. And so as an early 20-something person, I was really struck by aquaculture as an element of applied marine biology, and really saw not only an academic path that way, but also a career path. And I've been fortunate. I've lived my dream.
You found it early and you've stuck with it for sure. What other academic programs are available? You mentioned applied marine biology. In terms of, student interests, can you give a sense of the academic programs more broadly that are available?
That there's an aquaculture course, I believe, offered at the introductory level. I think we have the capacity and potential to eventually offer an undergraduate degree in aquaculture or certification in aquaculture, and maybe ultimately a graduate program in aquaculture. There's opportunities for paid internships. HPU received a U.S. Department of Agriculture grant that funds students to work at different organizations within a certain type, and we have a number of paid interns helping our fish and shrimp programs right now, actively involved in research. We have a number of internship programs, capstone courses with aquaculture researchers here at OI. So there's a number of points of connection where if you're at HPU and you're interested in marine biology in general and aquaculture in particular, there are absolutely paid and volunteer opportunities for you at OI, and we've been very fortunate to take advantage of really bright young people helping us do the things we do here.
Well, you mentioned that it's the #1 employer of HPU grads on the island, and it sounds like
Yeah.
there's plenty of opportunities for students to progress from student to internship or grad assistant, and then moving on
Yes.
into professional positions in the most unique place on the planet to study.
Absolutely. In fact, our uh, departmental director for the shrimp department doing the shrimp genetics work right now is a former HPU undergrad. He was my student back in the mid-90s as an HPU undergrad when I was teaching in the marine sciences department. And he came on board, went through graduate school, got his PhD. We brought him back, and he's now running the shrimp breeding program. And I might add, right now, we have a 4-year grant with the Indonesian government to help Indonesia establish a national shrimp breeding program there. So we're taking our technology and we're trying to help developing countries uh, develop a more sustainable approach to shrimp farming. And that's really exciting. The other really nice collateral benefit, Jeff, about this discipline is the ability to travel worldwide. I've been so blessed in my career to have traveled throughout the world with my aquaculture hat on, and it's you learn so much by going to other places and experiencing other cultures. And aquaculture provides that very powerful conduit to see the world and to do something important. So we have this 4-year Indonesia project where we're fortunate their breeding center was sited on the beautiful island of Bali in Indonesia, which is beautiful place, and so we get to go to Bali once a year or so to do our work there. And so not just Bali, but globally, it's a global industry, and so it does provide that opportunity.
Wow. When you think back over the years, you called out, one student success. Does anything else, come to mind when you think about just student success over the years and something amazing that's come out of the work, or a student that's really, done something remarkable?
The yellow tang story, that yellow tang story I talked about, where we were the first in the world to reproduce it in captivity and really remain the only people in the world to be able to reproduce it in captivity. The cornerstone technology that allowed us to raise these fish in captivity, the Coca-Cola formula, if you will, was developed in large part from a former graduate student at HPU. He was a graduate student working with Dr. Chad Callan at the time. And he figured out the Coca-Cola formula to feed the baby yellow tang. Without getting too technical, yellow tang are, again, these iconic, beautiful reef fish. They get about the size of a couple of silver dollars. They're not huge, but they get a decent size, 6 or 7 inches in length. But the eggs they produce are tiny, like the size of a tip of a needle. They're barely visible with the naked eye. And after they use their yolk sac, it takes about 3 days for them to use their yolk sac up. They're required, they have what's called an obligatory live prey requirement. They have to eat something that's moving, a small piece of plankton in the ocean. That's what they eat on the reefs. For years, we couldn't find a live prey item small enough to fit in the mouths of our baby yellow tang. And so literally after almost 10 years or more, this HPU graduate student came in. His name is Dean Klein. He came in and went out into the local waters, did what's called a plankton tow. It's basically taking a fine mesh net, sweeping the water for it, and he identified critters, zooplankton, if you will, in the water, one of which produced a larval stage that was sufficiently small to get into the mouth of the yellow tang. And that was the Coca-Cola formula right there. So then we had to learn how to aquaculture that little tiny minute live prey item to feed the tens of thousands or more yellow tang larvae we were producing. But we finally got that. But it was through the hard work and dedication of an HPU graduate student working with Dr. Chad Callan and his team that really changed changed the paradigm of marine ornamental aquaculture and created this yellow tang capacity to rear them in captivity. So
Wow.
yeah, I mean, it's really quite remarkable. As a graduate student, you never think you're going to be able to really move the needle on a technology or an approach, but this HPU student surely did.
Wow,
Yeah,
changing the world with that work. My God.
yeah.
Well, what advice would you give to students interested, in pursuing a career in aqualife and marine sciences? And what's your best advice for students that are interested in exploring?
I think certainly one of the most important paradigms, and my dad taught me this, is follow your passion. If you're not passionate about it, you're not going to do a great job. But you have to kind of overlay over your passion some elements of pragmatism. So you have to be realistic about creating a career and earning a living with your passion. And while you may not be able to realize the ideal vision of your career, you can come pretty close. You've got to be able to compromise a little bit, but I would say follow your passion, but make sure you're infusing that drive with elements of pragmatism and you're realistic about what you can do. I mean, we all probably wanted to be rock and roll stars when we were younger. That's a passion, but it may not be practical. I mean, play the guitar at a local bar on weekends and find another job. But no, seriously, I think it's this smart infusion of passion and pragmatism that will lead you to a successful career.
Wow, I think that's great advice for any young person looking to find their pathway through life. And I can definitely see that you are among the lucky ones who found
Yeah.
that passion early and pursued it and have carved out a great career for you, and one that's beneficial to everybody on the planet, given the challenges that we're dealing with today.
Yeah, yeah. No, that you just triggered a thought. I had the blessing of I was on the Big Island on Tuesday, meeting with a group that is focused on the local IA, the Hawaiian fish pond community. And one of the things we did is we sat around a circle, and the leader of the group read a poem, and the poem was about the threads in your life and how you think about the threads. And so we all had to kind of sitting around a group talk about how this poem had meaning to us. And my response was basically, I look at my career here at OI, which is 30 plus years, and I think about the people who came before me. We all stand on the shoulders of giants. So I look back on the thread that way, but I also think about the thread moving forward, and who are we mentoring? Who are we teaching? Who are we providing counsel for in the future to take the mission of that thread into perpetuity? And so it's looking back and looking forward, and I think mentoring is an important responsibility for those of us who've been fortunate enough to acquire knowledge and do important things. So that's where the connection with HPU and having students come in. We're able to try and train up the next generation of leaders and technical people to help us solve these really huge problems, transdisciplinary problems we're going to be faced with. So HPU provides that platform, and OI provides a conduit. And so it's, again, exciting times.
Very much so. Well, Shaun, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I'm excited to have you back again on the show to talk more about all these topics, which are just so interesting, and just things that even if you're not in this profession, I think all of us can understand the impact and importance of the work that you're doing and the Institute is doing. So I want to thank you for your time. And as I said, we're going to have you back on and talk more in the future.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.